This is Gemara Yevamos, a daf memvav, the daf for the first day of the last days of Yantiv of Shish al Pesach has been generously sponsored L'Zechanishra as Chaim Mordechai Ben and Naftali Tzvi, whose yard site is coming up in Chav Zayin Nisan and Mirz Hashem. The learning the entire Chabura should bring Chaim Mordechai Ben Naftali Tzvi to a higher place in Gan Eden Shamayla, and particularly learning on such an auspicious day, the day of Geula, the day of Shira, the day of Shish al Pesach, should bring Chaim Mordechai Ben Naftali Tzvi to an incredible high place in Gan Eden Shamayla. As well, the learning should be as Chashidach V'Shalchaim Devar Tam V'Tzivu Bas Valarach Hashem Ben Chayo Evik V'Natali Shom Levi Zava V'Lim Yudis V'Asima Malka and they should find the Shidach B'Karayv, as well as the Schutz for Hashem V'Shal Yezeh and your faith Shmo Ben Tilan Tavzim B'Chlas and Nechama Bas Shiva Sarablu Ma'azmul Chaim Moshe Yeshua Ben Malka B'Shavik V'Shirchana V'Soich Sha'ar Chayli Yisrael. And we're 3 lines from the bottom of Mem Hey Amid Beis. Says the Gemara beginning a bit of a new topic, a first cousin to yesterday's discussion. Today we're going to discuss Geirus, and we're going to begin with Geirus, the process of conversion of an Eved. So, Amar Rav Chama bar Guya Marav Lekech Eved Minha Akum. Each detail here always is important, but particularly here we're going to see how critical the details are. Someone buys an Eved from a guy. So there's a guy that owns a slave, a non-Jewish person, and then one buys that Eved from the guy. Of course, in order for that Eved to come into the Jew's jurisdiction, the Eved, there's an interesting din, he's going to become some level Jewish. Every Eved, even though he's a non-Jew, he goes to the mikvah, and he accepts upon himself some level of mitzvahs, and that's part of being an Eved for a Yid. The mitzvahs he accepts are somewhat like a woman, mitzvahs are not totally in Zman. And therefore, that is the process of buying an Eved from a guy. He goes to the mikvah, and then in the Jews' jurisdiction, he is some level, we'll call it a Yid. But what does this guy do? V'kadam v'taval l'shem ben chayrin. He goes and he jumps into the mikvah not to be an Eved of a Jew, but rather he jumps into the mikvah l'shem ben chayrin, and he wants to be a free person, a full-fledged Yehudi, a full-fledged Jew. What's the halacha? Kana atzmai ben chayrin. He becomes a free man, and he becomes indeed a Yid. My time, what's the reason? What's going on over here? The Jew bought him. I paid good money to the guy for him. What's the reason? If he goes into the mikvah to be a free man and to become a Yid, he maintains that freedom. Says the Gemara, you know why? In the top of Memvav and Aleph, Akam Gufa Loikanale. When a guy owns an Eved, he doesn't own his guf, he doesn't own his body. He owns the rights to the guy. And therefore, that which he owns, he gives away to me, the Yid, the Maknali Israel. And since he went and he preempted it, what happens? His shibud is afkah. His shibud is nullified, his shibud disappears. And let's see the precedent for this. Rava has taught us, Rava 4 lines in the tab, Hektish Chametz. Again, how many times have we had references to Pesach over the 8 Shirim? Well, today's number 7 of the Pesach. Here it is again. Hektish Chametz V'Shechar. These 3 entities are entities in which one does not own the item itself, he only owns the rights in the item. The son, God forbid, as Chametz and Pesach comes, it's no longer his, it is ownerless, he only has the rights to the item. So in these 3 items, Mafkinon, Midei, Shibud, they no longer have a Shibud on them if these items were designated to pay for a loan. And Apoy Teki, it's called Apoy Teika, this is where you should collect from. I say someone can collect from my bagel supply. Becomes Pesach, that bagel supply becomes ownerless, it's no longer mine. So the shibud, the lien that he has on it, will disappear as well. So we're seeing over here that when one has the schus ishtamshus, when someone has the rights in an item, just like the guy has the rights in the Eved, that will disappear. That will disappear when there's nothing left. And therefore says the Gemara that we learn out from Rava that these 3 items are no longer going to be able to be collected from. But Masav Rav Chisda asked Rav Chisda, Maisa beBelir is Hagiyores. There was a guy named Belir, and she became a ger. Shekadbu Avdeo v'Tavlu Lifaneo, and her own slaves, she was becoming a Yid, and her slaves went. And what did they do? They were a taiva. They went into the mikvah Lifaneo before her. Critical detail. And they said these avadim, these servants, because they went to the mikvah, they're free people. They're no longer acquired by the buyer. And the Gemara is medayik, and the Gemara says, it sounds like this is only true because they went to the mikvah before Bilaria, before she became a yid. The obvious implication is if she already had gone to the mikvah, then it would not work. But the problem is, this should be akin to the case when I buy a guy, an eved from a guy, should be similar to this eved, this guy I should say, this bilaria. She becomes a yid, or bringing in the guy. It should bringing in the eved. It should be the same process. So why here is it only if they went to the mikvah before bilaria? According to what we just said a moment ago, if they went to the mikvah and they had das for ben chayris, they das to be a yid, they're going to come free. So why here does it seemingly apply only if they went to the mikvah prior, before Bilaria became a yid? Amar Rava, Lefanel is not dafka. Doesn't mean before she went to the mikvah. You know what Lefanel means? Lefanel means being bistan, being mufayrish. If they went to the mikvah before she did, then whether they went to the mikvah and they explicitly explained that they're doing it to become free, they're doing it to become a yid, or even bistam, then they'll become a yid. Lachareo, it's still going to work, and therefore when we began off today, we said that if this eved goes to the mikvah and he has das and he explicitly wants to become a yid, it works. It works. Efilu lachareo. But only b'mefayresh, only if he explicitly explains in bistam loy, but not if he does it for no purpose. So Rava has stood the test of time. Therefore, the Gemara continues and says, "Amar Rav Avio loishanu." This din of Rava, that when one buys an eved from a guy and the eved goes to the mikvah l'shem to be a free man and to become a yid, is loishanu Allah b'loikeach amina akum. Is only if you buy the eved from a guy. Aval akum gufei. But if the guy himself sells himself to the Jew, not that I bought him from another guy, but he sells himself, then I am indeed kind of his guf, his body, as the Torah teaches, and among the children of those who live with you, you're acquired to them, mayhem tiknu, from them you may acquire. And from here we're medayik atem kind of mayhem. So for here we learn out that the Yid could acquire an Eved. They cannot acquire another Eved, the Goyim. They cannot acquire one Eved from another. A guy cannot buy from a guy. Says the Gemara, why is this true? Why can't the guy purchase from a Yid? What's the big deal? They could purchase the Maisi Yodel. They could purchase the profits that come from this guy. The Ayvaksiv, as we see in the Torah, the pasuk says, as the pasuk says, if a Jew is sold to an idol of the ger, of the sojourner. And what do we learn out from here? Mishpachas ger ze'akum elalav legufei. What must be talking about over here? We must be talking about buying the evidence themselves. Even for a yid can acquire even the body of the guy. So if you buy the guy from him himself, if a guy comes knocking doors and says, I'm ready to sell myself to you, then you indeed are kind of the body. But if you buy the guy as an evid from another guy, then you're only buying this chus tamshus, you're only buying the rights to work with the guy. Says the Gemara, Parach Rav Acha, 3 lines into the wide lines, Ema bekaso betvila. Why do we say that it's only with kesef and tvila? How do you know that the kesef, you could buy a guy with the cash alone? Says the Gemara, you're right, kasha, that is not pashit. Says the Gemara, we're on the topic of Geiros today, the topic of conversion. Amar Shmuel, if one is buying a slave, and again we said that when you buy the slave, he has to go to the mikvah to become this this partial yid. Says the Shmuel, you have to bear down upon him, you have to push upon him when he's in the water. You want to ensure that immediately as he goes into the mikvah, what does this eved do? Does work for you, the yid. Because if not, he might have das for himself. So you have to ensure that the moment he goes in, you're having in das, and you have him do an act of work for you, the Yid. And the Gemara is going to explain exactly how this happens. Ki hai, as we've seen in the story, the Maninin Avdei. Maninin was the name of an Aved, Ravashi, Boilat, he needed to go to the mikvah to become of this quasi yid. Masrni alel Ravina Ravacha Brei Rava. Ravashi came over to Ravina Ravacha Brei Rava. Amar lo chazu de meinchai. And he said to them, chazu diminaychu kabo yislei. Be careful that I want him to be mine. And if this Eved somehow pulls shtick and becomes a free person and he's not mine, I'm going to make you guys pay. You the best, and be careful. Make sure he becomes mine. So Ramule Arvase Bisavare, Arvisa Bisavare, they put a leash around his neck. Arpule, they loosened it. Why do they loosen the leash? So that it's not a chatzitza, the water could go through. So they samsimu lay, and then they tightened it while he's in the water. So they're doing an immediate act of acquisition. As Gemara explains, Arpule kechdol chatzitza, as we said, simsimu lay kechdol actim, so that he will not have das to be a free man, and rather will do work with him immediately. And they said, Lo l'shem ben chayrin Evelema were nervous that he would say l'shem ben chayrin ani tayvel, I'm doing it for myself. So that's why right away they put the leash and they tie it and they pull it. So immediately he's for the yid. And what happened? Bahade de dalie reishe, as his head was coming out of the water, mimaya nuchule zolta tetina areshe. They put a pail of cement on his head. And they said to him, Zil amtu lebei marach, go to your master's house. Even though it seems there's no halachic requirement for this, they wanted everyone to see and everyone to show that right away he's doing work for the master. So no one could ever say, no, he didn't have to ask for that. He had to ask to become his own free yid. No, everyone sees right away he's doing work for the master. See these people of the house of Rababa who give money to the tax collectors for people without any money to pay for them. And since they pay their taxes, they take them as avodim. Is this a real act of acquisition? So much so that when they leave, you have to give them a get or not. If I was nifter, if I had died, I wouldn't have told you such a thing. Why? Because Rav Sheshes says, Marakayu. Rav Sheshes said, Marakayu dani betavsa demalka monach. The seal of work, of bondage, is in the king's closet. Oh, Malka Amar, what does the king say? He says that you're working, you are indeed indebted to the one that pays for you, and therefore, if you would want to free them, they're full-fledged Eved. When you pay their taxes, you indeed are acquiring them, and therefore when they will leave you, you would have to pay, you would have to give them a shtar shikhr, you have to indeed give them a get. Says the Gemara, Rav Chia bar Abba, we're about 20 lines from the bottom. The first line is Diyav Karga. Rav Chia bar Abba ikla ligavla. He went to a place called Gavla. Chaza benois. Chaza benois Yisrael dema'avrin migeirim shemalu v'loitavlu. And he saw that there were women who were together with Gerim who malu. They had a bris milah v'loitavlu. Now we're going to begin and learning about the process of Gerus. Learning about the two critical steps, aside for, of course, the Kabbalah's or Malchus Shamayim, the Kabbalah's mitzvahs that the guy has to take upon himself to become a Yid. He needs a bris milah, he has to go to the mikvah. So there's a story in which there were women that were pregnant from men who only had a bris milah, they did not go to the mikvah. And similarly, these, we'll call them half Goyim, half Yidin, were pouring wine, and the Yidden were drinking it. And number 3, they were cooking food, a food called turmis in a type of beet dish, and the Yidden were eating it. No one said anything. So 3 things that these quasi-Gerim Goyim were doing, and no one commented. So number 1, the kids are mamzir. Number 2, the wine is they pour the wine. And number 3, that's bishal akum. Nothing more explains. Ad she'imo v'yitvol. V'yimlo tavala v'chavenu. As we said, there's two processes. Milah, Tefillah, they only did one. Boom, they're full-fledged Gerim. V'amar Rav, and Rav says, Rabbi Yochanan come v'evid haba bas Yisrael. Havlan mamzer. Going back to what we've seen previously, if a guy or an Eved is with a Jewish woman, the child's a mamzer. Number two, it's an extra archaka. Even though they didn't actually pour the wine, they only diluted the wine. It's a din derabbanan that the guy dilutes your wine. We have to give it a din of yain nezech. And number three, that the turmesin, this dish that they cooked, has a din of bishul akum. Why? Ask the Gemara, b'nei Torah. B'nei Torah, Shari, what does that have to do with being b'nei Torah or not being b'nei Torah? They're a guy. Explains the Gemara. What are you talking about? Shmuel bar Yitzchak said in the name of Rav. These are the basic klalim of bishul akum. That if it's eaten raw, an apple, if a guy goes and cooks you an apple, it's no problem. Why is it no problem? Because it's something edible raw. It's no problem of a guy cooking it for you. But this beet, this vegetable, so you have a problem with bishul akum. Answers the Gemara. Rav Yochanan give the list of Svir Lei Damer Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak Mishrei the Rav. That's a second qualification. There's only bishul akum on something chashiv. So that's oila shulchan melachim, something that the king would eat. So they would serve at a fancy dinner. Maybe snacks, some want to say, are not oila shulchan melachim. Ramesha said not that way. But oila shulchan melachim, potato chips was the tshuva of Ramesha. But says the Gemara, these torments were not oila al shulchan melachim, and that's why there was no issue of bishul akum. And therefore, really, it was mutter. But the time of the b'nei Torah, because they were not b'nei Torah, he was nervous to give them this kula. B'nei Torah, sorry, but if they were indeed b'nei Torah, it would have been mutter. And that is the story. But now we go and we say, okay, we started off, we touched upon this two-step process of gerus, this milah, this tevila. Now says the Gemara, Tanur Rabbanan ger shema v'lo tavel. If we have a ger that does milah, not tevila, we have a machlekes. Rav Lazar marries a ger, shkin matzina b'avaseinu shema v'lo tavel. We find our forefathers. They went to the mikvah, the avos, and they had bris milah, they didn't go to the mikvah. Tavav leimal, Rabbi Shua marries a ger. Rabbi Shua says it's enough the opposite. Even just tefillah, the mothers, Sarif Karachan Leah, they of course didn't have milah, but they went to the mikvah. If you did only one, you have to always do both. So says the Gemara, that's the machlekes of Rav Lazar and Rav Yeshua. But I asked the Gemara, the classical Gemara ping pong as we call it, Rav Yeshua Naminel Me'avos. Rav Eliezer says you learn from the Avos. Why does Rav Yeshua say that? Rav Eliezer Naminel Me'imais. Why doesn't he learn from the Imais? Maybe the reason is you can't learn out from the Imais because it was impossible. They can't get a bris milah, they're a girl. That can't be the reason. Another mention of Pesach. How do you know the carbon Pesach? We didn't have one yet, but we still could have one on Pesach Sheni. We have to be worried. That's not worried. You have to want such. But how do we know by Pesach Dairais? They comes from Chulin. It doesn't come from Kedusha. Something with Kedusha doesn't come from Meiser Sheni. Never Pesach with Simon, never Pesach with Dairais. Ma Pesach Amura B'Tzrayim in Bayela Mina Chulin, because there was no karbanos of Pesach with Dairais. In Bayela Mina Chulin. So what do we see? We're learning done in Efsher Mishi Efsher by B'Tzrayim. They nothing else, and yet we're learning Allah Dairais. So says the Gemara, we seemingly should be able to learn out from the Imais. So why? Rav Lazar, Rav Yeshua, why does each one hold its other shita? Amalei Rav Akiva, v'chidan Efsher Mishi Efsher. Amalei Afal Pishi Efsher Raya Gedailu v'Nevu Imenu. So they asked over there on the Karban Pesach. We said, yeah, it's a Raya. So says the Gemara to answer up our stira Ella turning over to Ben Bava Mebeis. V'tav Avalei Mol Kulam Lei Pligi Demahan. Tevila, everyone agrees, helps on its own. Ki pligi, what's the machlokes? The opposite. B'mol v'lo yitav. Let's say yield me avos, and for the avos, we had milah, and it's all good. Rav Yeshua no, but Rav Yeshua nami, Rav Yeshua ba'avos nami tefillah avos. Rav Yeshua holds and learns. You're right that we can learn just on the avos. But says Rav Yeshua, they went to the mikvah. What's your raya? They only had bris milah without mikvah. I'll tell you, they went to the mikvah. Minole says the Gemara. How does Yeshua know that? Where did he get this idea? that the boys went to the mikvah. Go to the people in Matan Torah, and they should sanctify themselves today and tomorrow and to wash their clothing. So you learned out that over here when you need kibbutz, you don't need kibbutz, you don't need to wash your clothing yet, you have to go to the mikvah. Every other time you need to wash their clothing in the case of carry, certainly you should have to go to the mikvah. Says the Gemara, no, maybe they did it for cleanliness. Al me'acha, different source. Vayikach Moshe es Adam v'yizik alam. Moshe Rabbeinu took the blood, for chatos, and what did Moshe Rabbeinu do? And he sprinkled it on the people. They went to the mikvah. So that is how Rav Yeshua learned that they obviously went to the mikvah. Rav Yeshua asked the Gemara, Tefillah b'imois minalim. How does Rav Yeshua know that the imois went to the mikvah? That was obvious. Svaru dimkein b'man echlasu tachas gam v'yashenina. A beautiful svara. Sarah, Rivka, Rachav, Leah. How do we know they were Yidden? Must be they went to the mikvah. Amar Rav Chia barabba, Amar Rav Yechra, Loilam eno ger chiyimal v'yitzvo. What makes a ger? Both. Pshita. Yachav Rav Lacha Gerabim. Says the Gemara, what's your chiddush, Rav Chia barabba, Amar Rav Yechra? That's the sheet of the Chachamim. We had Rav Elazar. We had Rav Yeshua. And then the Chachamim said, you need both. So shkayach, were you telling me that you need both? That's what the Chachamim said. Explains the Gemara, man Chachamim is really Rabbi Yosi. The Chachamim over here is a das yachar of Rabbi Yosi. So it is a chiddush to say that's what we paskin. The Tanya Rishabah Amar Malti V'lo Tavalti Matfila Noisai. If someone says they got a mila, not a tefillah, we make him go to the mikvah. Umavakach. Either Mimana Shach Divi Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosi Oimer Ein Matfilin. We do not make him go to the mikvah. Why don't we make him go to the mikvah according to Rav Yosi? Because says Rav Yosi, we need both. And the fact that he said he had Mila is not enough. We need to ascertain and know for certain that he had Mila and Tefillah. Lefikach, says the Gemara, according to Rav Yehuda, Matil and Ger B'Shav is different Rav Yehuda. According to Rav Yehuda, that the Tefillah is just an added bonus. It's a cherry on top. Well, even allowed on Shabbos. Rav Yosi, since it's integral, it's not going to work. So the reason we need the member of Rav Yochanan to teach, we need both, is because it's a chiddush. It's not a chachamim of Rabbim, it's a chachamim of Rav Yosi. Says the Gemara, Amar Mar lefikach matfilin ger b'Shabbos. So Brisa concluded that based off of the previous discussion, will allow a ger to go to the mikvah on Shabbos because it's just an added bonus, according to Rav Yehuda. Says Mar Pshita. Once Rav Yehuda taught us only need one. Where he gave himself a bris milah. Of course, we're going to let him go to the mikvah on Shabbos. My lefikach. Lefikach means, it's true that it's a segue, it's a therefore, but it has to be some level of chiddush, some level of novelty, some level that the Brisa has to speak it out. According to the way we just learned the Brisa, it's not even the next step. It is the statement of Rav Yehuda that each one is independent. And once he said he had the bris milah, that suffices. Explains the Gemara, you know what the chiddush is? Rav Yehuda tefillah ikar. I would have thought, according to Rav Yehuda, that when Rav Yehuda says, he comes and he says, I had a bris milah, and therefore we send him into the mikvah. I would have thought that really tefillah by itself is enough. And therefore, tefillah b'Shabbos loy to come attacking Gavra. Therefore, we do not let you go to the mikvah on Shabbos because you're fixing the person. Kamash malon de Rav Yehuda. So the chiddush is gufa. That what is Shitas Rav Yehuda? Not that it's an ikar. It's either this or that. Either one suffices on its own, and therefore you could go to the mikvah on Shabbos. We'll just point out parenthetically that you need one or the other. Speaking about going to the mikvah on Shabbos, come attacking Gavra, this is one of the reasons why it's a big fight whether a man could go to the mikvah on Shabbos. Maybe there's a level of ticket, number one. Number two is this is the reason why, according to everyone, you can't do tefillas kelim on Shabbos because you're fixing the item. Mitakin kli, you're fixing the item that was broken, quote unquote, before and you couldn't use it, and now you could use it. And of course, we already spoke about many times, the one-time allowance heter is non-existent. There's no such thing with kelim. And therefore, if someone would have a keli, he can't use it on Shabbos if it was entitled. Perhaps an eitzah would be to be mafkarit, not such a geshmak eitzah, maybe give it to a guy, which also is not so simple. Let's continue. Says the Gemara of Yesi Yomer Ein Matfilin. So Rav Yosi says you don't go to the mikvah on Shabbos. Again, the same kasha. Pshita, according to Rav Yosi, that's bashik. Even the Rav Yosi tartivinon. It's obvious. Rav Yosi said you need mila, you need tefillah. So of course, it's not a second step. Why is the Brisa using extra words? It's telling me something we already know. Explains the Gemara 10 lines to the bottom. The first one line is Ma'u the team of Rav Yosi mila ekar. I would have thought according to Rav Yosi, really the mila is dicker. And in the case when he came and said, I had a bris mila. We don't know about that. He's saying it on his own. So since we did not see that milah, that's why we don't allow him to go to the mikvah. But perhaps in a case that we saw him have the bris milah, and now it's just a question, he needs stage 2 of tefillah. Maybe he could go to the mikvah on Shabbos. According to Rav Yosi, no, you indeed need both. You need the tefillah and the mikvah, and therefore we will not even allow you to go to the mikvah on Shabbos, even if we knew you already had the milah. I will conclude with Amar Rabba, says Rabba, of the Avibi Rav Chibar, Rabbi, Rav Yosef, Masni, Rav Yosef, Masni, Rav Yoshia, Baribi, Rav Safra Masni, Rav Yoshia, Rav Chia, Daslikame Ger, Daslikame. So to Shaila, who are the people in the story? But what happened? Daslikame Ger Shamav, like Taval, there was a Ger that came that a milah, not a tefillah, Amar Lei, and he said to him, Shehei kan ad lemachar v'nat tefillah. Wait till tomorrow, and tomorrow we'll let you go into the mikvah. It says the Gemara, 2 lines in the wide line, Shma mina tlas, Shma mina ger tzarich shleisha. We see that the ger needs 3 people there, a bezdin to witness the tefillah. Ushma mina in ger achima v'yitvil. You're not a ger until you do both the milah and the tefillah. Ushma mina b'thri, matilin ger b'leila. We don't let you go to the mikvah at night. Ask the Gemara of a name of Shamina Nami Bidin Mumchin. Maybe we see from here that you need a bezdin of mumchin, of experts. Explains the Gemara, no, domo dikla. Maybe that just happened in the story, and therefore you can't bring a raya from there. And we will Amar Rav Chia Barabba, Amar Rav Yochanan Ger Tzara Gimel Mishpat Ksiv Bey. And the source for this is because the fact that there says Mishpat. We'll pick it up from Tanu Rabbanim Mir Hashem in the next shiur.